Hi, today we're going to talk about Keats's poem, Eve of St Agnes. We're going to look at it in the context of Romanticism, and then we're going to talk specifically about the Gothic. And within the Gothic, we're going to look at aspects of the medieval, the architecture associated with the Gothic, imagery of decay, and then the natural world. So first off, brief introduction to Romanticism. You should know that there is no Keats essay you can ever write without mentioning that he is a Romantic poet. He is part of this movement retrospectively. He would not have known or considered himself to be a Romantic poet, but the literary world now looks back and bunches together a whole load of people. The second wave of Romantic poets is the wave to which Keats belonged. So Keats, as a Romantic poet, was interested in nature. He was interested in talking about how poetry should be written and how poetry came to be, the inspiration for poetry. And he was also interested in the medieval world and the spiritual, supernatural aspect of the medieval world and of nature. So these were topics that were all of interest to the Romantic poets, and they all are very important in reading the Eve of St Agnes. In particular, literary critics would suggest that the Eve of St Agnes is a piece of literature that would fit well in the Gothic genre. And Gothic, by this we generally mean literature that spooks you out. So rather like on Halloween, we might sit down and watch a horror film, maybe share that with friends and get into a spooky atmosphere. In the 19th century, when they didn't have any film, they would sit round and read Gothic novels. There are certainly some very famous cartoons and pictures of groups of women reading Gothic novels to freak themselves out by the light of a guttering candle. And you will have come across some Gothic novels such as Frankenstein, for example. You may well have seen the film of that. So this Gothic genre was part of the Romantic movement, and it was to do with fear and sensation, but also a writer writing in this genre would be very aware of setting. So in the Eve of St Agnes, one of the Gothic features that we can identify is a medieval setting. So for example, we have knights, we have reference to many an amorous cavalier, and we have, very importantly, a lady in distress, a vulnerable female, who is followed by and sought after by an ardent lover. Gothic literature also involves great passions, a sense of heightened passion and heightened sensation. And we certainly have this in the young Porphyro with his heart on fire, galloping across to seek out Madeline. We also have an extravagance that was very usual for the medieval era. There are 1,000 guests at this party, and so there is talk of the richness of the tapestries, the richness of music's golden tongue, for example. So Keats very obviously seeks to establish a medieval setting in this poem as a backdrop to the drama of his lady who needs rescuing. Another very typical aspect of Gothic literature is sinister buildings and sinister architecture. In this poem, this is introduced very early on by the beadsman who is wandering through the chapel, and there are effigies on the tombs. Everything is very cold. When we see Porphyro entering the castle, we see that he has to progress through lowly arched ways and that his helmet brushes against cobwebs. So here a sense of sinister surroundings is established. He also walks through many a dusky gallery, and this shows that his journey is kind of fraught with darkness and obstacles. It allows Keats to build up the tension and sense of mystery in his progression through the castle. Similarly with Madeline, when she enters her chamber, her candle extinguishes itself. And this again is a part of the Gothic atmosphere that's established, an external force. We don't know what it is, perhaps someone shuts a window or something, puts her into complete darkness. So there is a sense of terror, a sense of the unknown. Another aspect key to the Gothic genre is a sense of decay. And this can be a decay, a physical decay, or indeed a moral decay. And we have this with Angela, the aged crone. She is described as being palsied. She, of course, is Madeline's nurse. And there is some moral decay in her character when she allows Porphyro to penetrate the castle. She is persuaded by his charm and his wile to allow him to approach the young lady that she is supposed to be protecting. At the end, she gets her comeuppance. She died palsy twitch with meagre face deform, as Keats says. So there is decay and a lack of beauty, a lack of youth in her, and this adds to this Gothic feature in the poem. Similarly, the Bedesman, at the end he dies. Even at the beginning, he is presented as someone who lacks warmth, who lacks feeling. His fingers are numb and he has frosted breath. And he is a character that Keats uses perhaps to contrast with the burning heart, the ardent heart of Porphyro. And certainly he is used to contrast with the richness and the gaudiness of the knights and the medieval setting. His setting is very empty, very cold, very frosty, but one of moral superiority. He is praying, he is telling his beads, he is unblemished by the moral depravity of the excesses of the medieval world. Linked in with decay is the way nature is often presented in these Gothic texts. And here, again, we have a contrast between the warmth and the richness within the castle, the warmth of the young lovers' passion, but also the warmth and richness of the celebrations, with the outside world, which is rather like a Halloween setting. It is cold. The owl is cold despite his feathers. In the very first stanza, the hare is limping and the sheep is silent. This is indicative that something is awry with nature, something is wrong. Nature is not flourishing, nature is damaged, nature is not participating as it should be. And this is a dark, cold place to exist. At the end of the poem, there is a storm brewing up. The lovers fled away into the storm, like phantoms. That simile there is used to show how they go out into nature, and they, as young lovers, are brave and full of passion, and they can encounter the wildness of the natural world. And this is very much a romantic notion, that they will survive in the outdoors, their love will be enhanced by them battling through the weather. When they are inside even, this weather is encroaching upon them. The floor-blown sleet, Keats mentions, is pattering on their windows. It's almost as if the wildness of nature is calling them to go outside and experience it. So this is a very traditional ending for a poem in a Romantic era, that the youth are triumphant. The youth triumph and break with tradition, rather like these young poets Keats, Shelley and Byron, they break with tradition and they embrace nature, they embrace risk, and they embrace new things, new passions. So today I hope you've got a reasonable idea of the sorts of things you could write about in terms of context relating to Keats's poem, The Eve of St Agnes.